We rushed your husband to the emergency room after a traffic accident.
Suddenly receiving a call from the police, I dropped the coffee cup I was holding. It couldn't be true. Because my husband died 2 years ago when he fell into the sea. There were even witnesses. Someone must be impersonating my husband. To find out who and why someone would do such a thing, I headed to the hospital. When I visited the emergency room, I saw the pale profile of a man lying on a bed. No way, this can't be happening. I almost cried out in shock and covered my mouth with my hand. Oh, honey. It was unmistakably my husband. I am Annabelle, a 32-year-old company employee. I am raising my 4-year-old daughter alone. My husband, Tony, was supposed to have died 2 years ago. I was told that he fell into the sea and lost his life while working overseas. When I first received the news, I hope it's a case of mistaken identity. I wished, but according to the police, there were witnesses, so I had to believe it. According to those who saw it, my husband jumped in to save someone who had fallen into the sea, and then he disappeared. At that time, sharks were also seen in the water, and it was believed that the person who fell into the sea and my husband were both eaten by the sharks. My husband was rather timid, and I was surprised that he had the courage to jump into the sea to save someone. The local police conducted multiple searches, but my husband was never found, and only his backpack was found floating in the sea. In his backpack, there were photos of me and our daughter, his wallet, and other items. Tony, who usually told me not to touch his backpack, might have been embarrassed to show that he kept our photos in it. Thinking this, my sorrow over losing my husband grew even deeper. Eventually, I had no choice but to put his backpack in the coffin as a substitute for him and held a formal funeral for closure. Why did you leave us? I was grieving the sudden loss, but I had my daughter left behind. At the time, my 2-year-old daughter didn't understand the meaning of her father's funeral and smiled while sitting on my lap. Her behavior brought tears to the attendees. Poor thing. She doesn't understand that her father has passed away. The venue was filled with whispers and sobbing. After the funeral, I faced my daughter with my best smile, determined not to cry in front of her anymore. And I decided to do my best at work and raising my child alone. 2 years passed. I got used to living without my husband, rushing every morning to get dressed and eat, and it became a routine to greet the smiling photo of my husband with, "Daddy, we're off." I took my daughter to daycare and headed to my office. My parents often told me to come back home, but I wanted to keep the promise I made to my husband before he went overseas. I'll raise our daughter well, even on my own. Since my husband's body was never found, he was legally considered missing, so I couldn't receive survivor's pension, making it financially difficult on my own. But I worked hard for my daughter's sake. Despite being only 4, my daughter helped me with folding laundry and putting away dishes, showing her consideration for me. Living with my kind and honest daughter was poor but very happy. Then one day, I received a sudden call from the police.
We rushed your husband to the emergency room after a traffic accident.
Huh? My husband died 2 years ago.
What?
The shock was so great that I dropped and broke the coffee cup I was holding. What is going on? Confused, I thought someone must be impersonating my husband. To find out who and why someone would do such a thing, I visited the hospital's emergency room, where I saw the pale profile of a man lying on a bed. No way, this can't be happening. I almost cried out in shock and covered my mouth with my hand. Oh, honey. It was unmistakably my husband. How can Tony, who was supposed to be dead, be here in America, alive? Even though I wanted to ask, he lay there unconscious. According to the police, my husband was riding a bicycle when he was hit from behind by a car. A nurse handed me his backpack as I stood there in shock. The backpack was very similar to the one I had placed in his coffin at the funeral. When I looked inside, there was a cell phone, and the home phone number in the address book was ours, which is why the police contacted me. When I opened the cell phone, I saw frequent messages exchanged with an unfamiliar woman. This woman might know about these past 2 years. I decided to call the number. I'm sorry to bother you, but do you know someone named Tony Garner? Who? I don't know anyone by that name. Why are you calling from this number? When I explained that I was using the cell phone of a man who was in a bicycle accident and carried a red and black backpack, the person on the other end of the line became quite agitated. What? This phone number belongs to my husband. He always carries a red and black backpack. But my husband's name is Andrew Diaz. Had he been living under a false name for the past 2 years? Moreover, the woman called him her husband. What is going on? I was increasingly confused. If he was alive, why hadn't he come back to me? Why was he with another woman? The more I thought about it, the less I understood. The woman said she would come to the hospital immediately. 30 minutes later, she arrived and clung to my husband's bedside, crying out, "Andrew, Andrew, hang in there." I watched in a daze. Her voice was so loud that a nurse came in and explained that he had undergone surgery for a complicated leg fracture and was still under anesthesia, so he wouldn't wake up for a while. "I'm so glad you're safe." The woman, relieved, wiped her tears and then looked at me suspiciously. "By the way, who are you? Are you a friend of his?" I took a deep breath and looked back at her. "Sorry, but that man is my husband." "What? Don't joke about such things." "I wish it were a joke." She stood up and approached me aggressively. "We have a child together. How can you say such terrible things when he's unconscious? Get out." She grabbed my shoulders and tried to push me out of the room. From her earnest expression, I felt she knew nothing either. I'm shocked too. So please, calm down and listen to me. When I showed her a photo of our family taken 2 years ago, she was shocked and agitated, but she eventually calmed down and told me her story. Her name was Bella. A very beautiful, fair-skinned 24-year-old woman. Apparently, she met my husband on a ship during a heartbroken trip overseas after a college breakup. She was comforted by him and became attracted to him, and he confessed that he fell in love with her at first sight. But he never mentioned being married. Bella continued, looking very confused. My husband told her that no matter how much he worked, all his earnings were taken by his parents, so he fled overseas. To avoid being found by his parents, he moved into Bella's apartment when they returned to America. He said once he paid off the debts his parents saddled him with, he would marry me officially. So, we didn't register our marriage, but we intended to eventually. She had been completely deceived by Tony. Thinking back, I remembered my husband's deceitful and irresponsible side. During these 2 years, thinking he was dead, only the good memories came back to me due to my sense of loss. But my husband was originally irresponsible, and he had cheated and lied to me before we got married. I shared my story from 2 years ago with Bella, who seemed equally bewildered. What on earth was he thinking? We looked at each other. I suddenly remembered and took out the notebook I had seen in his backpack. When I opened it, there was something unbelievable written inside. In the meeting room rather than my husband's hospital room, the nurse came to inform us. Your husband has woken up. When we returned to the hospital room, my husband was groaning in pain from his leg. Honey, I'm so glad you're okay. You were in a traffic accident.
Ah, Bella. You came. I remember now. I was on my bike, and suddenly I was airborne.
Upon waking up to see his young wife nearby, my husband seemed relieved. Bella, quite the actress, played the role of the caring wife well.
Have you been by my side the whole time?
Of course. It's for my dear husband.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
The husband who had abandoned me and our daughter for 2 years was flirting with a younger woman right in front of me. I felt a seething rage and approached to speak up. Oh, I've been here too. My husband widened his eyes in shock, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, we stared at each other as if time had stopped.
Annabelle. Why are you here?
The police contacted me. You left our home number registered in your cell phone.
Ah.
My husband's voice cracked completely, revealing his panic. I calmly spoke to him. So, you've become Andrew Diaz. I'm surprised.
That's...
My husband stammered, unable to form words, his face turning pale. Bella also spoke to him coldly. You lied about being single and escaping from your parents? How could you deceive me like this?
No, that wasn't my intention. I fell in love with you at first sight and just wanted to be with you.
My husband tried to make excuses, unaware that the more he spoke, the more his lies were exposed. That's strange. What you wrote in your diary contradicts what you're saying.
What? You read it?
My husband tried to snatch the diary from my hand, but in his condition, he couldn't get it back. I decided to read from it. Work abroad wasn't going well, and I wanted to escape when I met Bella. She seemed to be on a heartbreak trip, and she was easily deceived by my kind words. Her parents seem wealthy. If I stay with her, I can live comfortably. You're the worst.
That's,
Moreover, if I hire a witness to say I died at sea, I can end my marriage without paying alimony or child support. What is this all about? Realizing he couldn't talk his way out, my husband started getting angry.
How dare you read my diary? And I'm injured, you know.
Bella looked at him sadly as he turned red with anger. I can't believe I trusted and was deceived by someone like you. It's truly pathetic.
I'm sorry. But I still want to be with you. I'll divorce my wife.
At that moment, an older couple entered the hospital room. They were Bella's parents.
Why are Bella's parents here?
I called them.
You always interfere.
As my husband tried to insult me, Bella's parents began yelling at him.
How dare you deceive our daughter? We'll sue you for alimony and child support.
They declared and started to leave the room with Bella.
Bella, wait. Please.
I never want to see your face again. Despite my husband's pitiful cries, Bella and her parents left, slamming the door behind them. After a moment of silence, My husband turned to me with a pleading look.
I'm sorry. But I couldn't help it. I met my destined one. Please understand.
Oh, I see. Given the circumstances, it can't be helped. Thinking he had convinced me, my husband brightened up and took my hand.
I knew you'd understand. You're my wife after all. I'll come back to you. I'm sorry for the past 2 years.
Yes, I was lonely. He seemed to think he had smoothly persuaded me. He stroked my hand and smirked. At that moment,
Don't be ridiculous. Do you know what Annabelle has been through? I will never forgive you.
Ha! Your parents too. And my parents? Why are they all here?
in the sudden development of both sets of parents gathering in the hospital room, my husband was left gaping and wide-eyed. Everyone was furious, and it looked like they were about to pounce on him, bedridden as he was.
Annabelle, I'm sorry. Let's start over. Just get them out of here.
My husband, teary-eyed, pleaded for help, but I held back my urge to punch him and coldly told him, "The moment you abandoned me and our daughter, our ties were severed. Starting over is out of the question."
Please don't say that. I'm injured and can't move. I need someone to help me.
You brought this on yourself. We will proceed with the divorce. I will also claim alimony and child support. In reality, I had held a symbolic funeral for him 2 years ago, but we had kept our marriage on paper until the 7-year mark for a missing person declaration. Now, I could properly divorce him and cut all ties.
No way.
Also, I informed the police. The hired witness who claimed you died at sea will be caught too. You should prepare yourself.
I feel sick. Call a doctor, not the police.
Feigning weakness, he began to look pitiful. He had a habit of lying to escape when things didn't go his way.
Take responsibility for your own mess.
My father-in-law shouted at my husband. Even as he continued to look up at me with pleading eyes, I responded with a smile. Thank you for being alive. So, please make sure to pay the alimony and child support. Realizing there was no one left to save him, he covered himself with the blanket and started crying. After that, I officially divorced my husband. His parents paid $30,000 in alimony and $100,000 in child support up front. Bella also reported being deceived to the police. His parents also paid her for his alimony and child support. My husband was arrested and went to jail. When he gets out, he'll have to work hard to repay his parents, watched by strict relatives to prevent escape. It will take him a long time to repay his debts. I moved back to my parents' house and started living happily with my daughter. Now, every morning my daughter says, "Grandpa, Grandma, I'm off to school," and heads to daycare. To protect my daughter's smiling face as she grows, I will continue to do my best. How did you find this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.